So, Jeff, have you ever watched The Chosen on the app?
On the app or on the TV?
Oh, either one.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it's good.
Well, today we're talking about Jesus choosing the 12.
Oh, that's going to be cool. So he's Chris and I'm Jeff and we're the Bible guys. Well, if they already made a movie of it, why do we need to talk about it?
What, The Chosen?
Yeah, just tell people go watch it.
Yeah, just go watch that. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night, or good morning. That's funny. Yeah. Hey,
Okay.
So today, it's one of our favorite segments to sing.
Oh.
It's Mailbags.
Mailbags.
So this is somebody writing in, which, by the way, you could, wow, a new one.
Yeah, there
a
we
new
go.
tune.
I found a new harmony spot.
So if you want to write in a question that you want us to tackle, or just, use, and this particular question isn't a Stump the Pastor question. It is just a fun question. Oh. So if you want to type in fun questions, we'll be happy to try to put them in our segment of mailbags.
Fun question.
No, mailbags.
Oh, okay.
So here's the question. It's written by Lauren B.
Hi, Lauren B.
And she asks this question: what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oof.
Not you've given, like you've given, but you've been given.
How about for you?
For me?
Do you have a great one?
Yeah, I do, actually. The thing that first popped into my head was when I was young, I had Sarah, who's now almost 30 years old. She was probably 6 weeks old or something. And what they did was they went around the room in our little small church, and they said, "Hey, everybody, what is a piece of advice as parents that you can give to the young parents?" And somebody said something I'll never forget, and it changed my life, and I'm not even kidding.
Oh, wow.
It said, your kid's going to go through a lot of stages, and a lot of stages may not be your favorite. And a lot of parents have said, well, I can't wait till my kid gets through this stage, the terrible twos, or I can't wait till this kid starts talking, or whatever it is. And they said, never, ever, ever wish for the other stage, because the stage that you're in is just a phase. It'll go by so fast. So even if you even if it isn't your favorite stage, appreciate it because it's only here once. And I remember, watching all three of my children go through all the phases that they went through, even when they were in junior high, and they were fighting each other. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, it's okay because this stage is going to come and go and it'll be gone forever. So It was probably the best advice I've ever been given.
Wow, that's good advice. I've had so many good advice things, but I think the one of the best advice things I've ever gotten is happy wife, happy life.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's good. It saved my life several times. So So there's that. But I was thinking about get wisdom, work hard. Don't overestimate what you can get done in 1 year and don't underestimate what you can get done in 5. I think from a leadership standpoint, those ideas have been really life-changing for me because you can get really frustrated as you're leaning into an idea or leaning into growth or leaning into building a thing that it's just not going fast enough. And instead, you want to build it healthy and strong. And then I had an old guy, an old Marine. He said, I want to give you a tip.
Geez, how old was he? You used 3 old adjectives.
Yeah, World War II.
Was he like 107?
He was a World War II Marine. So, yeah, he was close to it, right?
Wow.
So I was like maybe 30-something, and he said, let me give you a tip. He said, in his experience, life can be really tough. You lose a lot of sleep. Sometimes you get bound up inside. And he said, so I would encourage you, never take a sleeping pill and a laxative on the same night.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know what? Now that I think about it, that's probably really great advice.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've never considered doing that. But if I ever do, I'll remember the old
Marine.
Old Marine who once told you that.
But he told it to me with a look in his eye, like from experience, right?
Yeah. And if somebody's that old, they know about that. Yeah, that's really funny. Well, hey, thank you, Lauren B.
Yes.
And again, if you want to, leave comments or leave us a review, it would even be better on Spotify. give us a like, whatever it is, to interact with us. We would appreciate it. Or if you ever want to email us, by the way, you can email us at info@thebibleguys.com,
Right.
and we will be glad to interact with you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we are talking about Jesus choosing the 12 disciples.
Yeah.
And this shows up in 2 passages. So now he's already, if you remember, he's already individually changed Peter's name, Simon's name to Peter.
Yeah, he's already interacted with several people.
He's already asked them to follow him,
right.
right? And so what was happening was there's kind of intermittent following. Follow him for a little while they have a couple days off, and then go back to fishing. Follow him a couple days, and then, it's going back and forth. Well, then here it goes. In Mark chapter 3 and then also in Luke chapter 6, same thing. It says, afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain and called out the ones he wanted to go with him. And they came to him. And then he appointed 12 of them and called them his apostles. They were to accompany him, and he would send them out to preach, giving them authority to cast out demons. And these are the 12 he chose: Simon, who he named Peter, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, but Jesus nicknamed them sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. And then in Luke, says basically the same thing. One day, soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. At daybreak, he called together all of his disciples and chose 12 of them to be apostles. And here are their names: Simon, who he named Peter, Andrew, Peter's brother, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him.
Yeah, so you say Alphaeus. I've always read it as Alphaeus. But it reads probably better
Potato,
as Alphaeus.
Potato.
Tomato.
There you go. Do you know the song? Did you know the Sunday school song?
No, there's a Sunday school song about the 12 disciples.
There were 12 discipus. Jesus called to help him. You know that one?
I've heard people reference it.
Yeah. Simon, Peter, Andrew, James's brother John, Philip, Thomas, Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon, Judas, and Bartholomew.
Oh my goodness!
You don't know that one?
No, I do not.
No,
That's hilarious.
It's all 12.
Well, I mean,
how do you remember the 12 disciples?
I didn't. When I went to Sunday school, I was already like 15.
Yeah, so was I. No,
I never went to Sunday school below that.
Oh yeah.
So the only time that I experienced like kids Sunday school is when I taught it.
Yeah. So my mom taught junior church in the
Okay.
church I went to, and so I would volunteer with her. So really, to be honest with you, that's where I learned it.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So hey, there's several things. First of all, that I want to get out of the way. The very first thing is this: Jesus gave nicknames, and
I love it, and good nicknames.
The Sons of Thunder. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, the other day you had a former staff member that worked for you, and his last name was Savage.
Savage, yeah, Jimmy Savage.
Jimmy Savage, and he actually started a company. What did you say it was titled?
Savage Media.
Savage Media, and you said it's the coolest name ever.
Yeah.
And I said whatever he puts his name on is going to be the coolest thing ever, right?
Yep, that's right.
And so the Sons of Thunder, it's just James and John. They were just fishermen, and
So the Greek for that is Boanerges, which is a cool name too.
yeah,
Right?
Yeah,
Boanerges means sons of thunder. And so how cool was James and John's dad?
Oh yeah,
Right? Where Jesus is like, the creator of thunder.
Yeah, Zebedee, right? Zebedee.
Yeah. But how cool was he that Jesus is like, your dad's thunder, man.
Yeah, that's so great.
So was he a yeller?
That's right, Sons of Thunder. I always looked at it as they are sons, meaning brothers of thunder. Thunder applied to them.
Oh, no.
You're saying that
Zebedee was thunder. Yeah, oh yeah. Oh. Because they were all working together on the boat when he called them. They were working with their dad then.
I wonder, I'm going to get to heaven. We're going to have a debate about this.
No, there's no debate.
We're going to sit down with Jesus and we're going to be like, no, you were referring to his sons and you called them the sons because they were the sons in the group and they were the sons of thunder. They were the ones of thunder.
But Zebedee was thunder.
But it makes more sense that Zebedee was thunder.
So you know what that means. So they're fishermen, and you know how sound carries across the water.
Sure.
And so probably Zebedee was a yeller.
That's funny.
Yeah. I would imagine that's it.
Yeah, and so
But
and
still
then
a cool name, Sons of Thunder.
and then of course he nicknamed Simon, who he called Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that nickname in the Greek translates actually into stone. It's we know it as rock, but it's really referred to as a stone that you hold in your hand. And so what's interesting about that is that passage later on where Jesus says, "On this rock, on this I will build my church." Right? And the Greek word there that he uses is like, "On this rock I will build my church," is a different word,
Right.
and it's actually refers to as a mountainside, right, or like a cliff, right? And so yeah, it's a little bit confusing without the Greek. But anyway, the point is that nobody else has nicknames,
Yeah.
right?
Well, the zealot,
Well, he was a zealot before he joined, so he was just like.
but he was called the zealot.
Yeah, you're right. He
So
was
they
called
weren't
the
calling
zealot.
him Simon.
Right. Well, Matthew was probably called the tax collector.
Yeah.
And
It doesn't say that.
by the way, he was probably called a lot of things.
He is called it dirty rotten.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just going to say this. Remember, I said there were several things about this. Is that whenever you ask somebody to name the 12 disciples, they always say Peter, James, and John. And if you think about it, you know people today that are named Peter, James, and John, right? But you probably don't know too many named Thaddeus.
No, not many. Or Bartholomew.
Or Bartholomew, right? Although, there's a few Bartholomew.
Bart's, Barney's.
Yeah, right. And you don't know too many Judases.
No, not many.
Yeah.
I know a few Judases. That's just not their real name.
Right. And right. But that's really great.
And you know who you are.
Yeah. So here's another thing that stands out is that it says that he went to his disciples and he asked 12 of them to be apostles. And there's a lot of people that are confused about this because even just a moment ago, you sang a song and you said the 12 disciples, right? And but what's really interesting is that disciples, every apostle is a disciple, but not every disciple is an apostle.
That's correct.
So there's a lot of times in the scriptures where it'll say Jesus was, among all his disciples. It doesn't always mean the 12.
Right.
It means everybody who's following him. Everybody who's following him could be a disciple. So, the disciples was a generic term. And then he asked the 12 to be apostles, which is interesting because the song says, Jesus had 12 disciples.
Yeah, right. He had way more disciples.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But
it's not inappropriate to call them the disciples. As a matter of fact, multiple times in the Gospels, it refers to the 12 disciples.
The 12 disciples, yeah. But technically, their title was apostle.
Yeah, the bigger title is the 12.
Right.
Not the disciples. Right. So it might call them the 12 disciples or the 12 apostles, but really the bigger one was the 12, those that Jesus called out of the rest of the group.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a larger group. So remember, there's huge crowds.
Yeah.
Then there was this assembly, this group of disciples that were following him regularly, not perpetually, but regularly. And out of that, he asks these 12 to say, "Hey, would you come with me, and let's make this your full-time gig?" Right.
Yeah.
So this is maybe a third of the way through Jesus' ministry, right? At this point. So there's a couple of notes in the Life Application Study Bible, and the one for 14 says, "From the hundreds of people who followed him from place to place, Jesus chose 12 to be his apostles." Apostle means messenger or authorized representative. Because remember, the differentiation here is you're going to preach on my behalf, you're going to have the power to do miracles, cast out demons, right?
Right.
So that's a whole other level that he's inviting them to. The number 12 corresponds to the 12 tribes of Israel, according to Matthew 19, showing the continuity between the old religious system and the new one based on Jesus' message. Many people followed Jesus, but these 12 received the most intense training. And then here's the note that I really wanted to highlight. Jesus did not choose these 12 to be his close companions because of their faith, because their faith often faltered. He didn't choose them because of their talent or ability. No one stood out with unusual ability. These are just normal guys. They're dock workers. They're fixing their nets. They're fishermen. They're tax collectors. They're political zealots. There's nothing that goes, "Oh, wow, that guy was going to be a superstar anyways," right? And so it says the disciples represented a wide range of backgrounds and life experiences, but apparently they had no more leadership potential than those who were not chosen. The one characteristic they all shared was their willingness to obey Jesus. Right? So to be you, I think that the greatest ability, and you've heard this, the greatest ability is availability.
Right.
Right? And they were willing to obey. Jesus said, "Come, follow me." They said, "Okay." Jesus would send them to do things, and they would do it. They just obeyed what he had to say. And that's the differentiation. We tend to set them up on pedestals. We call them saints, all this stuff. But the reality is these are normal guys who just chose to obey, which means then you and I can do the same.
Yeah.
Right?
That's great. It's interesting. I mentioned before that whenever you ask people to name the 12 disciples, they usually say Peter, James, and John. So Jesus had his 12, but he really had the three, right? And then really you could argue and say he had the one, which is I think Peter, right?
Yeah.
But the three was Peter, James, and John. And John referred to himself as the one whom Jesus loved. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's really funny. But I did a study of this when I was in college, in Bible college actually, and I started to wonder, why was it that Jesus played favorites? At least it seemed on the surface that he played favorites. So I started to notice, like when he went up to pray up on the mountain, and there was a transfiguration, he called up Peter, James, and John. When he went to go heal the little girl and raise her from the dead, everybody laughed at him because he said she was sleeping, and he said, "Everybody out," except for Peter, James, and John. When they were in the garden, and he said, "I'm going to go to pray a little bit further," he said, "Come with me, Peter, James, and John." And there were moments where Peter, James, and John got to experience Jesus in a way that nobody else got to experience him, and it was like in the next level. And Jesus invited them to be a part of those things. And I started to think, why would he do that? Is he playing favorites? And then what I did was I sort of was reading through, and I started to notice that there were certain people referenced in the Bible who pulled him aside and asked him to know more. Like, for instance, when he was teaching about the seeds that are scattered, some among thorns, some among rocks, some among weeds, he was telling that parable, and it said he taught the disciples, and he said, then they all went away. And he said, then Peter, James, and John, and in this case, it was Andrew also, who came to him, and they said, tell us more on how to know these things. And then Jesus gave the whole entire meaning of the parable, but he didn't give the meaning of the parable to the masses.
Right.
He only gave it to those who wanted to know more. And then like Peter pulls him aside and says, how often should I forgive, right? Peter, James, and John pull him aside and ask him, why couldn't we cast out demons, And all the way through the scriptures, whenever he was pulled aside and asked something personal by somebody who wants to know more than the crowd, it was most often, almost exclusively actually, Peter, James, and John, except for I think one reference of Andrew. And so, and
Well, you had Thomas too. So you had Thomas saying, we don't know where you're going, Lord.
Yeah,
Can we know? In John 14.
I guess what I'm saying is,
but the majority
about his
of the time,
teaching.
the ones that were coming and asking for clarity on teaching, it was Peter,
it was
James, John,
teaching is what I'm
and
referring
Andrew.
to. Yeah. And so anyway, I started to make this connection, and I started to believe that it wasn't Jesus who played favorites; it was actually Jesus responding to their willing heart.
Yeah.
And so these guys showed initiative. These guys pursued God more. They wanted to know more than the crowd. And so there's a sermon in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So, for us, we go to church and what do? We sit down with the crowd, right? And we hear a message or whatever if we do go to church. And then we walk away. And for those people who like consider that their entire spirituality, they're not going to go to the next level.
Yeah.
Right? But when you listen to a podcast or when you read the Bible, when you pray, when you do your devotions, I believe that God honors those kind of pursuits, that discipline, that heart. And what he's going to do, he's going to respond, and you're going to experience Jesus in a way that those around you may not, because you are wanting to know him more.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's any of them that Jesus would not have gone. I mean, he chose them to be part of the 12, but I wonder if Thaddeus.
Yeah.
Jesus thought, man, that guy's got it together.
Yeah.
But Thaddeus just didn't push forward, and because I know in my life as a leader, I look for other people who have high potential to invest in. I look for them, and on occasion try to pull them in. But I also know there are a lot of people in my life that I wind up being around that maybe I wouldn't have reached out and grabbed, but they just keep being where I'm at, doing what I'm doing, and getting in on the thing that I'm doing, and that seems to be a little bit of it. And that's why I said I think some of the greatest ability is availability. These guys are there, and then they have a curiosity that the others don't seem to have. Right, so they're aware that there's what was it last week we talked about that whole kung fu movie thing, there's this other level. There's this new plane to go to.
Yeah.
It's like these guys had an awareness that there was more to it than just the words Jesus said.
Yeah.
Right. And so they had this curiosity that caused them to lean in a little bit more, which then gave them more access to Jesus because they were asking about the thing that was important to him. Right.
Yes. Do you last night, you and I and our wives,
Yeah.
and Chad and his wife, Debbie and his wife, we all went out to dinner.
Debbie and her husband.
Debbie and his wife, yeah. Debbie and her husband. We all went out to dinner, and we had dinner with another couple.
Yeah.
And we were there till late. So you guys headed out, and then we all stayed, and we were there till like 10:30 or whatever it was. So at 10:18 p.m. last night, I get a text from a friend of mine who's probably 40 years old, and his name is James Loggins. And he was one of my very, very, very first, when I was a youth pastor, he was actually in the 6th grade. And I remember he was my neighbor two doors down. And I pursued him, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing? My name's Chris." At the time, I was only 21, right? He started coming to my youth group, and he was in my youth group all the way through. I saw him until he graduated high school, right? And then he went into the ministry himself. That wasn't really for him after a few years, and all these kind of things. So he texted me last night, and here's what he says to Liz and I. "So my son went to his first night of youth group tonight as a 6th grader. Brings back so many memories. Thank you guys for pouring into my life." So the benefit of, being around for a long time in ministry is when you see that, and here he is now like 40 years old, and he's got a son going there, and it's like, wow, that is just incredible.
Yeah.
So we have kids who we poured into 30 years ago that are still saying these kinds of things. And by the way, that is nothing more than a form of discipleship. Right. So he was sort of my disciple, and he grew up, and I tried to pour into him, and then he went into ministry, and I was just trying to give him advice the entire time through. And again, he stepped out of it, but it has served God his entire life.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm sure you have dozens and dozens of people like that as well, right?
Sure.
Because when especially if you're in one area, like that long, right?
Yeah, yeah,
which is really
absolutely
cool. So, well, it's a good message on discipleship. So I think that's a good place to end. Any last final thoughts?
Yeah, so I had a conversation with a guy, great pastor, incredible influence in a nation in Southeast Asia, and 75,000 people have been led to Jesus through his ministry. Just incredible. And they asked him, what is a disciple? And he started laughing. He said, "Oh, that's controversial," because it's all Americans with him. And then they pushed, and he said, "Okay, I don't mean to be offensive, but in America, you think discipleship is one more DVD, another book. Let's go through this lesson or this Bible study." And he says, because there's a massive multi-billion-dollar publishing system in your country. He said, but in my country, there is no Christian publishing system. All we have is the Bible. And he said, so we've had to really define what a disciple is. If you're going to try to determine how to do discipleship, you have to first determine what are you trying to get out of it, right? What should the disciple look like when you're done? And he said, I'm not sure that more DVDs and Bible studies is the answer. He said, so we determine, here's what a disciple is. A disciple is somebody who hears Jesus and obeys Jesus. That's it. Right? So then how do we teach people to hear Jesus and obey them? Because if they hear him and obey him, they'll learn to love him. And I went, oh, there you go. That's it. So on the simplest level, that's what these guys are. He said, come follow me. And they did. Not only did they follow him, they obeyed him. And then he chose these 12 out of that whole group. That's what he did.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's our time. So we will see you next time on the Bible Guys.